Look at this magnificent creature. Such radiance. Such majesty. Destroy it! Continuing in my journey to play Kingdom Hearts as incorrectly as possible, our next stop is Dream Drop Distance, possibly the most divisive game in the entire series. While the story leaves a lot to be desired, in my opinion, I find the ideas they explored in this game to be genuinely some of the most fun in the franchise. One of the many unique things in this game are the spirits. These little goobers act as your party members throughout the game, and are even how you're supposed to get abilities and certain commands in your playthrough. So what happens if we just get rid of them? Unfortunately, you're not allowed to simply clear out your party, and the game forces 2 spirits on you right at the start. So after clearing all the tutorials and finding ourselves at the first available combat encounter, we ask ourselves what it cost and promptly come to the conclusion that it cost everything. After committing what can only be classified as a hate crime against all things good in this world, we set out on the first of many grinding sessions of the run. Playing on critical mode and not having access to the safety nets of spirits and abilities in this run means that it's very important to either meet or exceed all the bosses in terms of stats. Sadly, the devs of this game are evil, and all the bosses in this game have ridiculously high attack stats, so you'll really never have enough defense without an unreasonable amount of grinding. Thankfully, if you can survive long enough until Hako Monkey takes you down under, then the fight becomes significantly easier. The first round of worlds for Sora is used primarily for setup for the rest of the run. The game hands out 2 free balloon res to you, and Sora is able to grab them both without fighting a single boss after Traverse Town. I'm sorry to any balloon haters out there watching this video, but if the devs are going to generously give me a tactical nuke, I'm going to use it. On to La City des Cloches, that's the only time I'll ever attempt to say that world's name out loud. This world was what pointed out to me the importance of being at the battle level, and also how much I hate risky wins. The boss of this world hits like a truck, and is fully capable of killing you with one move if you aren't paying attention. I found keeping my distance put him in a pretty consistent cycle though, and Balloonra did what it does best. Over in the grid now, Rizzler hits pretty hard, but none of his moves are particularly difficult to dodge. Whenever he throws his disc, he leaves himself wide open for a Balloonra, and if you can manage to get Disc Jammer, then the fight's really easy, but Nomura did not bless me on this day. Shock Divers rejoice, it's time for a world full of forced fights. Prankster's Paradise is a really cool world that's sadly balanced out by how miserable it is to play through. This next part of the game can only be described as a certified Dream Drop Distance moment. A lot seemed to go wrong in this world, and at times it felt like even the game was against me at this point. The enemies in this particular fight have super armor, and they seem to retaliate after every move I made, so in the end I just decided to sit on top of the platform and spam Balloonra until the evil bears went away. One of the things that makes Kingdom Hearts such a satisfying game to play in my opinion is that as you progress through the game, you'll increase your stats from leveling up, and your HP will increase from making story progress, so the farther into the game you get, the more fun you'll end up having. However, this does mean the early parts of these games are a little miserable to get through, especially on critical mode where damage is doubled. Getting sat on in a hilarious fashion and promptly losing all of my health in the process was not particularly funny to me at the time, but believe it or not, this boss was actually one of the easier ones in this run. Now that Sora's first worlds are done, it's time to move on to Riku's section. Before we do that though, we have to waste all of the drop bonuses we would have had for Riku if I was smart and made sure Sora had access to a bargain sale before starting his worlds. Riku's fights go much smoother because he has the benefit of having more than just 2 Balloonras. His fight against Hako Monkey is also just naturally easier because you can stun him with Sliding Dive. The only part that's really challenging is when he spawns a bunch of his hands, but if you can make it past that, then the rest of the fight here is pretty free. The City of Bells is a pretty quick world. We go from point A to point B and lose to the boss a few times before locking in. At this point, the strategy has reached peak efficiency, but trust me, it can get worse. Making up for the rather short experience as Sora, the grid makes sure you remember it on Riku's side as you're thrown immediately into a minigame with no downtime and no healing. After a few playthroughs, this minigame just becomes annoying, but I still have nightmares of my first playthrough of this part. Comantis, is probably one of the hardest parts of the run. Even being at the level the game wanted me to be at, I'd sometimes blink and suddenly my health bar would just be gone. But if you bash your head against a wall for long enough, eventually it has to break and we move on to Monstro. Yet another world where the only point of interest is the boss fight. We spend most of the fight waiting for our turn to play the game. This boss has a lot of scary moves, but you can just jump over most of them with flow motion. You just have to watch out for the laser attack, but if you manage to get behind it, then the fight's pretty much over at that point. Back to Traverse Town for story reasons, we fight a bunch of dinosaurs and nothing else of importance happens. Over in Sora's second visit of Traverse Town, this fight showed me that the retry button exists only to get you killed in this godforsaken video game. Sora's boss fight of this section might be one of, if not the hardest parts of the game. You have to fight 3 buffed up versions of previous boss fights all back to back, and doing this section without once more and second chance proved to be very challenging for me. It was probably the second hardest part of the run for me, and we'll get into the first one later. Everything in this world visit seemed to enjoy one-shotting me, so I eventually adopted a strategy where whenever I lost to the boss, I would go out and level up until I got a defense increase and try again. If I lost to the boss again, I would repeat the cycle, and eventually the game chose mercy. I don't think this one was because of my stats, honestly. With the early game wrapped up, it's now time to head toward the mid-game, and these next 2 worlds are probably some of the best in the entire series. Country of the Musketeers opens with a forced fight that goes about as well as it can, and the fight against the Tyrannorex goes exactly as it would in a normal run. The fight against the Beagle Bros is actually a really interesting one because there are different strategies each character uses to deal with them. Sora's strategy uses zero gravity to completely invalidate them, and on a normal run, Zero Gravisa goes crazy here. After developing mild pachydermophobia, Osaka once again shows their inability to make a decent alternative dodge for these games, and we move on to Peg Leg Pete. This fight is another one of those fights where the game gets to decide whether you win or not. The Beastie Boys are the easy part of this fight because on top of being weak to zero gravity, they're also weak to shock dive, as all things seem to be in this game. But once Pete takes the stage, the mood changes. He's only difficult for one reason, all of his other attacks are completely fine, but once he starts swinging around on the stage props, you just gotta start rolling and pray to your god Pete chooses mercy. I ended up using the leveling strat I used for Sora's second Traverse Town visit here too, and once again it really felt like the game was just in a good mood for this one. Symphony of Sorcery is probably the easiest world I did in this run. There's no forced fights here, and both bosses are basically auto-scrollers at this point. So we get to just go through one of the best crafted worlds the series has ever seen. If you've never seen this strategy before, Spelican is hilariously weak to Magnet. If you alternate Collision Magnets and Balloonras, you'll consistently stunlock the boss with no chance of it breaking out unless you're really not paying attention, or you try to use the Reality Shift. After stocking up from an incredibly hyped bargain sale, we move on to Riku. Finally getting to use drop bonuses as Riku makes this next segment significantly less painful than his last one. Facing off against the Bagel Boys, we get to see the other way to fight these guys. I picked up Minnie from a chest in Monstros specifically to use in this part of the game. The Beagle Boys are susceptible to the Mini status, which essentially means they're weak to it, and if you mash target while running toward them, you'll tear through their HP in no time. I'm unsure why spamming lock-on does this, but it sure is effective. The game giveth, the game taketh away, and in this particular case, the game taketh away a lot. What can only be the product of internal sabotage by a lunatic, the devs decided to go through with making Holy Moly a boss fight in this game, and yeah, this goes about as well as it can too. Holy Moly has more than just a funny name, but sadly the whimsy does not accompany these things. The arena for this fight is gigantic, and the boss teleports around it frequently, sometimes deciding to peace out right as you finally made it to where he is. The wonderful cherry on top here, however, is his move where he disappears and spawns a bunch of hands. This move is designed to waste your time. You'll die pretty much every time you try to engage with it, so you're better off just waiting for the boss to come back instead. In traditional RPG fashion though, enough level grinding will solve every problem, but the emotional damage will never recover. As a nice breath of fresh air, Riku's Symphony of Sorcery is literally the easiest part of the game. The only mandatory fight in this world is the boss fight, and even then it's a drop sequence where you only have to hit him 3 times. The true boss fight in this world is against Lord Kyrune. This is a special boss that rotates around 3 locations between both characters' worlds, retaining any damage taken in the previous encounters, and whoever defeats the boss gets an increase to their HP. I give Riku this bonus because he has to fight like 5 final bosses compared to Sora's 1, and the boost helps make them more manageable because 3 of them are in a row. Speaking of final bosses, it's now time to beat the game. Since Riku has to fight 5 bosses basically all back to back with almost no breaks, it's in your best interest to set it up so that Riku has Overcast for his section before fighting Sora's final boss. For those not in the loop, Overcast increases everything's magic by 20%. Making the bosses more powerful may not seem like a good idea at first, but the increase to Riku's damage far outweighs the increase to the enemies. Seeing as it has a 9% chance to show up though, I decided to take this time to try and get 2 really powerful commands for Riku from Sora's drop bonuses. Dark Roll and Dark Barrier are very helpful for Riku's funny little boss rush at the end of the game, but they both only have about a 6% chance of showing up, and only for Sora. Sadly, I was only able to get Dark Roll before Overcast showed up, but this was definitely the more important of the two, finally showing that they can make something better than Dodge Roll. Dark Roll has significantly more invulnerability and is just generally better in every way. Going up against Xemnas as a level 63 Sora was not part of my original plan, but it was a pleasant surprise. Xemnas hits like a truck, which is nothing new to this challenge. Thankfully, if you can survive until he starts throwing the entire city at you, you can get some very valuable hits in before he recovers. After this part, however, seemed to be the problem here. Xemnas gets very aggressive after this part, and I swear, from my perspective, it seemed like he started staggering less to my onslaught of balloons. After nearly having another Icarus moment, Xemnas succumbed to the joy of balloon animals, and we wrap up Sora's story. Riku's final world is honestly miserable. I've mentioned the goofy A5 boss gauntlet, but now it's time to live it. Starting with the anti-black coat, that's literally his name. If you've ever seen a speedrun of this game, you'll know that double flight is the bane of this boss's existence, and as long as the game plays nicely, you'll get through it relatively easily. The next fight in Riku's wacky quintuple-stacked burger of a final boss does not go as easily, though. Naturally, Ansem starts the fight in the most toxic way he can and has us floating on the wind. This of course means we don't have access to our fancy new dodge, and of course the game didn't give me Dark Barrier before this fight. If you don't get the reality shift quick enough in this fight, then congratulations, curtains, you're done. But even if you get the reality shift, Ansem does a lot of damage. Yep, you guessed it, I sure did level grind until I was able to beat the boss again. So after reaching a casual level 60, Ansem still does a lot of damage, but now so do we. I'll preface this next part by saying this was the hardest part of the run. Ansem 2 is one of those boss fights that's really cool to see, but really not fun to experience. His entire moveset is designed to simply erase you from existence, and there were a lot of times where I died and could not comprehend how. All it took was one loss to Ansem 2 to immediately send me into a downward spiral, and suddenly easy bosses became infinitely more difficult for me. Struggling with one boss inevitably meant struggling with the next 4 waiting in the queue, so after enough losses I just decided, fuck it, level 99. Being 3 times the world level makes the game as easy as you would expect it to be, but somehow, some way, Ansem was still swatting me down like a fly. To this day, I still don't know what they fed this man's to make him so strong. This fight really isn't supposed to be this hard. Getting the reality shift is the key to victory here, and of course, critical mode makes them much harder to get, so you know, it's cool. After nearly 4 hours of attempting this fight, it's finally over, and my childhood trauma of this game remains affirmed. Once you beat both characters' final bosses, you unlock the true final boss, and the recently departed souls of our dear friends Meow Wow and Komori Bat force their help upon us one final time. In a cruel attempt at a joke, the next 2 bosses are laughably easy compared to the titan that was Ansem. Not easy by any means, but let me remind you I am level 99. One thing that still has me heated about the young Xehanort fight is how quickly that timer went down for the time stop gimmick of the fight. Like, bro did not give me a chance here. Believe it or not, both of these last bosses share the same weakness to double flight as Blackcoat had, so we abuse their lack of vertical mobility and feel great while doing it. One thing I thought was funny about the last boss is that Ventus has this move where he takes away your spirits, but in this challenge, nothing of value is lost here, and with that, the challenge is done. But if you've seen the other challenges I've done here, you'll know it's only just begun. Like other games in the series, beating the final boss unlocks secret boss fights throughout the game. While most of these secret fights are just rematches against the previous bosses in the game, there is one traditional secret boss in this game. Completely out of nowhere, Julius from that one 1995 Mickey Mouse short is the secret boss of this game. Julius is a very tough boss, capable of tearing through your health if you're not careful. When playing as Riku, if you have 4 Firaga bursts and maximize your reload speed, you're actually able to completely deal with Julius without ever touching the ground again if you double jump in the right spot. Sadly, we get neither Firaga burst or faster reloads without spirits, so we use a different strategy against Julius. Turns out, under the right circumstances, you can just stunlock Julius with regular ass balloon. If Julius is ever interrupted during a move, he's programmed to try and use it again when he recovers from the stagger, and while I never said we'd use a cool strategy to beat him, it sure is efficient. Moving on to Riku's side of the boss rematches, most of these fights are exactly the same as the first fights, but even being level 99, they still demand your respect. I'm having a hard time finding things to say about these fights because most of them are literally the exact same as their story fight, but it was funny seeing how some of these fights were almost easier than the story ones just because my stats were higher. I've already given my 2 cents on Comantus and Holy Moly in this video, and yeah, they're just as bad here too. After getting our grubby little hands on the unbound Keyblade for Riku, we move on to Sora to finish out this challenge. The strategy for Sora remains exactly the same as for Riku. We disrespect Julius one final time and proceed to spam Balloonra against all the bosses. Wargoyle made me doubt my own convictions for a moment because my dodge wasn't working very well in this fight for some reason, and going against all logic, Slide Roll was the answer to this problem. Let it be known, I have since revoked these newfound ideals. Slide Roll is bad, and I will never let it deceive me again. Something I found funny was that the rematch against Pete is significantly easier than the story version. For some reason they made the harder version of this boss weak to stun, which Balloon Magic is very good at applying. Just make sure you bring enough. I'm giving Spellikin another segment before the end exclusively because this fight is just hilarious to me. This boss literally cannot do anything to you if you bring Collision Magnet into the fight, and I love it so much. With the second Unbound Keyblade acquired, my work here is done, and it's time to wrap up the video. This silly little idea popped into my head a little over a year ago, and I genuinely didn't expect it to be as difficult or as interesting as it turned out to be. Like, yeah, I pretty much just spammed Balloonra as if it was any other run of the game, but take Spellikin for example. Normally you'd be able to get 2 Balloonras in before needing to use Collision Magnet again, but if I did that without any attack hastes, then eventually I'd run out of commands and Spellikin would break free. Even without spirits, that strategy is still possible with a different structure. Lots of little things like that fascinated me during my playthrough, and I hope that you managed to find something like that in this video too. As always, the full recordings will be on my Vods channel eventually, so if that interests you, the link will be there. Consider subscribing if you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.